Okay. Taiwan President Lai Ching-te says Taiwan's air defense network is necessary because any attack on Taiwan will involve Chinese missile strikes. Take a look.
我们一定要捍卫我们国家主权，捍卫我们得来不易的民主制度，捍卫我们人民打拼的经济成果。所以我们一定要强化我们的国防预算。我们要打造台湾之盾。 我们要运用人工智慧，建立一个及时的攻防体系。
T-Dome will be an air defense and interception network that aims to achieve 3 goals. 1, layered defense across high, medium and low altitudes. 2, integration of AI. And 3, enhanced situational awareness. Now, Taiwan's Tiancong 4 is the first line of defense intercepting ballistic missiles at a range of 70 and possibly 100 kilometers. The next layer is US Patriots and Taiwan's Tiancong 3, which can intercept cruise missiles. So that was the missile component. Now, here are some possible parts of the T-Dome's nervous system. There are early warning radars, possibly Link 16 to enable real-time communication with the US, and of course, a command and control system. Jima, let me ask you first. So let's talk about this concept of the T-Dome. What is it intended to achieve that the current air defenses do not now?
It's important that Taiwan ensure that all of its air and missile defense systems are integrated at the national level. So if there are drones coming at Taiwan, if there are cruise missiles, ballistic missiles coming at Taiwan, the systems that are appropriate for each of the threats are designated and deploy against the best optimal threat. And so the other part of this is that if and when the United States joins into the war, those same kinds of systems, the air and missile defense systems that the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Army have, and the Air Force, can be integrated into this overall system. And that's why it's important for T-Dome to get approved, so that should Taiwan be attacked, the overall air and missile defense system can both integrate internally, jointly, and in a combined manner with the United States and possibly Japan and the Philippines.
So that's the integration of the Patriot and NASAMS.
Right, at the national, at the Taiwanese level, that's the way it should be done, and especially since NASAMS is a new system coming in, and also these other systems could also be impacted. For example, if an Aegis cruiser off the coast of Taiwan is in a good position to shoot down a ballistic missile, that system has to communicate between the U.S. and Taiwan.
Right, right. That was actually my next question. So that cross-system firing, one sensor here detects something, and then a shooter from a different system could be engaged.
Correct.
The best one. Kitch, the Iran war was the first time the U.S. Reported that it made decisions based on AI in terms of targeting and tracking. Now, turning that round to air defense, how can AI help Taiwan, and specifically in this system?
So I think it's very important first to acknowledge using AI in systems right now is not a novel step. That's literally just catching up, especially if your adversary is someone like China, who's been developing basically AI-assisted command control systems.
And yet this was the first time the Iran war that the U.S. said it used it. So
exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So basically, like, what the U.S. were doing, like, basically two things, right? Automation for span of control. That means what? I can engage way more targets than I used to, right? You look at what the U.S. are doing for the airstrikes. You have 500 targets every day. That means what? Hundreds of ATOs every day. This literally used to translate into thousands of people writing orders. Now you have AI to automate to do that for you. To do target development, right? And you still have human in the loop to avoid blue on blue. Remember, 70% of the losses during the first Gulf for U.S. was blue on blue. That's very important. And the second part is basically generating insights from your intelligence, right? Used to be like, I gotta have people looking at Twitter, looking at telegrams, and try to basically write this up and verify everything. And by the time you do, it's already too late. Now you can use that to translate that into real-time intelligence, right? For Taiwan's air defenses, that means like you can focus on what's important. You got to decide what's the priority, and then you can decide what's important, right? This means you have a higher threshold for saturation attacks. You can increase the threshold because literally you can focus more. But also it can tell you what's your basically better situational awareness, right? You have a better picture. You understand what it's easier for you to tell what the Chinese center of gravity are for specific operations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Holmes, that is the name of the game, isn't it? These saturation attacks. Now, I want to refer to an article that you wrote where you said Taiwan needs to adopt more of this sort of John F. Kennedy approach to T-dome or Taiwan's defenses.
Yeah.
Can you explain? I mean, we do need to say that Kennedy announced to Congress in 1961 that he or the U.S., his administration would land a man on the moon by the end of this decade.
Right. Yeah. President Kennedy announced the Moonshot program, right, in 1961, and of course, less than 10 years, United States sent Neil Armstrong to walk on the moon, and that was a successful mission. But what I'm trying to point out is that is the first large engineering program make use of systems engineering, and I would call T-dome Taiwan's moonshot because the system is very, very complicated. Taiwan has never done such huge undertaking in the past. And unfortunately, truth be told, Taiwan has very little experience in systems engineering. So therefore, the mindset of the military as well as this Lai administration needs to change. It's not just we should not be discussing how many interceptors, how many missiles we want to buy, but rather how we can degrade China's capabilities to attack Taiwan.
So those conversations are not being had at the same time, as well as having to purchase these systems, which will be components of the entire whole.
So if we are talking about purely from the interceptions perspective, right? First, the top tier will be the interceptor, right? Like PAC-3 or Tiangong and so on, right? And then the next layer will be electronic warfare. This is the part that Taiwan has not talked about. Taiwan's in the last few decades has invested very little, if not. Well, I don't want to criticize any further than that, but Taiwan should focus more on electronic warfare. Ukraine's experience has pointed out that if you can divert the enemy's missiles, right, or artillery shells, that is GPS or GNSS guided, you can severely degrade its effectiveness. Taiwan has not internalized the Ukrainians' lesson. So other than so interceptors, electronic warfares, and then the CRAM, or a counter rocket artillery and motor, right? These are the stuff that Taiwan is buying. And the bottom, as a last resort, is I would call it a passive defense that involves camouflage, civil defense, and so on and so forth. These are the things that Taiwan should really be looking more closely.
In terms of this electronic warfare, so can that be also part of T-dome, so that T-dome is both a missile shield as well as an electromagnetic shield?
Absolutely. If we are talking about asymmetric warfare, that is definitely the substance of the asymmetric warfare that Taiwan should be conducting, rather than keeping on intercepting the PLA's missiles. When I say counterforce, we need to, in the words of P. Hexes, he said recently that we need to kill the archer rather than shooting down the arrows, right? If we can neutralize PLA's capabilities of keep attacking Taiwan with their missiles or long-range rocket systems, then yeah.
So Taiwan. That was the U.S. strategy in Iran of where they would basically strike the launchers as soon as they came out the tunnels.
Right.
Yeah. Something similar to that. Gemma, I want to pick up on something that Holmes had said. He was saying that Taiwan does not have the experience of, building something so extensive, this sort of system engineering. And maybe I can ask both of you. China in November lashed out at Israel. The reason being, Taiwan's Deputy Foreign Minister, that's Francois Wu, had traveled to Israel, and many believe that this was, on a trip to discuss cooperation on T-dome. How do you believe that Tel Aviv could help?
I think there are three main areas that Israel can help. First of all, it's tactical expertise. In other words, it has a lot of experience dealing with different kinds of missile threats, both lower, mid, and higher tier missile systems. So what's going on in Taiwan is it has the same kinds of conceptual threats. It's just that China is obviously on steroids in terms of numbers, okay? So that's one thing. Second thing is Israel can help with system integration. It can help create a unified sensor-to-shooter network for both Taiwanese and U.S. missile defense systems. And also it can help them do the counterforce that Holmes mentioned too, because they're doing that as well, because they have an interest, because they don't want to be struck by these missiles from Iran. And third is the technology transfer. Most people don't realize it, but a lot of technology was transferred to Taiwan from Israel in the 1980s and 90s. For example, many of the missile systems that Taiwan has today was sold to Taiwan and permitted by the Israeli government to make its own production. For example, the anti-ship missile, the air-to-air missiles, et cetera. These are all Israeli technology that they gave to Taiwan.